Good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad you could join Project Learning Tree Canada's webinar, Whoa, That's a Green Job. I'm Kathy Abusow, President and CEO of Project Learning Tree Canada, which is an initiative of the Sustainable Forestry Initiative. Thank you so much for joining us today. So who's going to solve our future sustainability challenges? You are. There are so many opportunities and so many challenges to solve, and they all involve green jobs. We're really pleased at Project Learning Tree Canada that we've started over the course of the last 2 years to place students under 30 or in green jobs across the SFI network and the Canadian Parks Council network. We're proud that we've achieved gender balance. Almost a quarter of our jobs have been rural youth, and almost 12% of our jobs have been Indigenous youth. And these jobs were all green jobs in the forest sector and the Canadian park sector. So at SFI, our vision is a world that values and benefits from sustainably managed forests. And now more than ever, we need to make better choices for the planet. And that involves having people that can help us advance the solutions. So we know that climate change is increasing forest fires and catastrophic forest fires. And so while living healthy trees store carbon, trees that are on fire obviously emit carbon dioxide and contribute to greenhouse gas emissions. So we need to adapt to a changing climate. We have to look at forest management practices that can help us adapt. And we are already seeing data from the Canadian Forest Service that demonstrates managed forests are doing a better job of sequestering carbon than unmanaged forests, which is very important. And what do we want? What's the end goal? Healthy forests. Healthy forests for people, healthy forests for biodiversity, healthy forests for the wide variety of values that they provide, whether it's clean water or clean air or sustainable building products or a wide variety of solutions. What are some of our challenges today? It's species recovery around the globe. Whether in forests or not in forests, we're seeing a decline in species. One of the solutions is a green job that involves managing forests and forest habitats to help recover species. And SFI is a leader in this space through our network of SFI program participants and conservation groups to provide solutions to help species recovery. For all of these sorts of solutions, you need someone that's out there looking, tracking wildlife, looking at the habitat, looking at their nutrition needs, and understanding the positive role that forest management can play in species recovery. And we're so pleased to be part of the solution. Again, a host of jobs there. You have to have been living under a rock if you haven't heard about ocean plastics. It's a big deal. And there's all sorts of things we need to do to change the way to change some of the choices we make and to prevent such a crisis in terms of ocean plastics. One of the things, certainly not the full solution, but one of the things that you can consider is whether you need that water bottle or what types of ways that you choose to purchase materials. Certainly, if you're purchasing paper-based products that are a renewable resource that can be recycled and compostable, that is part of the solution. Again, provided it comes from a sustainably managed forest, and that's our mission, and so many jobs associated with that. Likewise, in terms of the climate crisis, architects and builders are increasingly understanding that when a tree is harvested and that tree goes into a long living building product, that carbon is continued to be stored in that solid wood product, and there's more carbon being sequestered as a new tree is planted in its place and growing and sequestering more carbon. And so part of the purchasing decisions and buying decisions and procurement decisions of architects, builders, and designers, or even what you choose to build your deck with, means you can be part of the solution of choosing products that store carbon, again, as long as they're from a well-managed forest, which is part of our goal and mission and many jobs that are associated with this. But there are all sorts of jobs associated with building and engineers and designers and knowing product specs and how they contribute to different conservation and societal outcomes or solutions. And this is, you know, many career paths in this pathway as well. So we have growing green jobs now more than ever. Do we need them? There are many, many challenges, but what is so cool is never before has sustainable forest management been so able to provide part of the solution. Well, I guess it's always been able to provide part of the solution, but never before have people started to understand the role that sustainably managed forests and forest products can play as part of the solution. And we're excited about letting more and more people know about the jobs available in this sector. So we've been doing a lot to grow the future forest leaders. As I mentioned in our beginning slide, in Project Learning Tree Canada, we'll be hosting a series of webinars and exchanges. We're running a mentorship program if you're interested. We're going to be putting out a wide variety of tools that support employees or youth looking for employment or youth facing barriers to employment, and also tools to support employers who want to ensure that the jobs aren't just great jobs, but that the environment in which youth find themselves is a positive, solutions-oriented environment where their voices are heard. And so Project Learning Tree Canada is going to be doing quite a bit to grow the skills of future employees and employers, and we're quite excited about that. We've got a great team to do that. So this could be your office if you want to change the world. These are some of the photos that were taken in the last couple of summers from youth in green jobs making a difference in a green job. And I want to mention that while many of these ones that you're seeing, of course, are outdoor jobs, the reality is that many of the jobs can be in manufacturing, engineering, designing, that actually are also in an office, but are contributing to societal benefits and advancing sustainability. You're going to hear about a variety of those jobs over the course of the next few speakers, and I'm so pleased to introduce Kevin Edgson. He's CEO of EACOM Timber Corporation. He's also a board member of the Sustainable Forestry Initiative and Project Learning Tree Canada on our executive. So thank you, Kevin, for taking the time to be here today and to share some of your thoughts and also to moderate the panel of speakers that's coming up. So over to you, Kevin.
Thank you so much, Kathy, and it's a real pleasure to be here. As Kathy had said, I'm the President and CEO of EACOM Timber Corporation here in Canada, based out of Montreal. I'll be today's moderator. PLT Canada has lined up some great speakers that are going to be able to speak to the opportunities that are in our industry. I think one of the things that is not well appreciated is really the vast array of opportunities there are within the spectrum of the forest and forest management, and we'll get to hear a number of those today. The way today's program is going to work, we're going to have 3 segments. We have 2 speakers each. In that, I will introduce them. We'll start off with forest management, move on to conservation, and then end up with innovation and products. After each pair of speakers, we'll take a brief period. There'll be a Q&A session. There's a button on the bottom of your screens. You'll be able to write in your questions, and we'll do our best to address those before moving on to the next group. So without wasting any more of anybody's time, we'll move on. Our first 2 speakers, I'll introduce first Lacey Rose. Lacey works on the forest land base owned by the County of Renfrew, helping to make sure that it is sustainably managed. The forest is managed for social values and recreation, wildlife and ecological benefits, and wood products that are processed at local mills. Over to you, Lacey.
Oh, I'm still muted. Okay, can you hear me now?
Can hear you fine, please.
Perfect. Okay. Sharing my screen here. Thanks so much for having me, and thank you for hosting this SFI. I think it's a great way for people to learn about future jobs for themselves. I titled my presentation, Getting Paid to Be Here, The Life of a Forester, because I often do reflect on the fact that here I am in the top picture here, young girl living in Labrador, all the time, you know, and I still do that now as an adult. I spend as much time in the woods as possible. And I think it's really great that now I have a job that enables me to continue to do that. So bottom picture, this is me at work. So it's not much difference. As Kevin mentioned, I do work for the County of Renfrew. I manage their forest on their behalf. It's a small forest, about 6,600 hectares, but that enables me to do everything very hands-on. I'm involved in all stages of the management of that forest. So I've really gotten a lot of practical experience in that role. So this is something that people ask me all the time. What is a forester? And I was trying to Google some clip art to see what comes up when you Google forester. And it is still like the bearded lumberjack wearing plaid, wielding an axe. That's not really true anymore. I can't really give you a definition of what a forester does because there are so many different jobs that people do as a forester. So I gave it some thought of what could I change my email signature to instead of forester. So the number one would be caretaker of forests. That's definitely something that all foresters take heart very much. That is the role that we play in all jobs. We definitely balance values, the ecological, social, and economic values of the forest. All of us play a role in planning for future generations. So one of our main objectives is to make sure that the benefits that we derive from the forest today are available for all future generations to have those same benefits from forests. At any and all times, we can be a hugger, cutter, and grower of trees, definitely making sure that forests continue to be on the land base. And we're also a supplier of renewable natural wood products. So that's something that I feel really proud about. I'm proud to have wood in my house, which is built out of wood, and use wood products every day because I know that if they come from Canadian forests, that means that they come from a sustainably managed forest because of the laws that we have in Canada and also the certification programs that are in place here. So how do you become a forester? The easiest way is to take an accredited undergraduate or graduate program. And if you're interested, you can find a list of the programs in Canada that are accredited. I included the link there, but if you just Google FPRC accredited programs, you can see the schools that you could pursue this kind of a program at. There are other ways to become a forester that put a lot of time and onus on you later in your career to go through, but several people have been successful in doing that. We recognize that people gain skills through work experience as well, so that is a possibility. Once you have completed that program, you apply to the Professional Foresters Association in your province, get the relevant postgraduate work experience, and then you will meet the requirements to become a registered professional forester. So my path was going to the University of New Brunswick in Fredericton. I had some strange and wonderful first jobs getting that experience. I worked in Denver, Colorado, Cochrane, Ontario, Folliet, Ontario, then landed in the Ottawa Valley, and I've been kind of in and around here since 2006, doing several different jobs. I think something that's really interesting to note, and this is one of the main reasons that I chose forestry, not even knowing what it was in the beginning, was at the time that I enrolled in the program, they were advertising a 95% post-graduation employment rate. And I was like, oh, that sounds pretty good. And I actually just found a stat from a couple of years ago that now in Ontario, there's 100% employment rate 2 years after graduation. So I think that's a pretty good selling feature. And I think I would definitely make the same choice again. So why do I love my green job? Every day is different. I encounter new things every day, new challenges. It's never boring, that's for sure. I always have an opportunity to be creative and solve problems, and that's something that I value very much. I really like finding new and better ways to do things, collaborating with other people doing the same job as me across the world to find out how they might be solving problems and managing their forests. There is a good mix of indoor and outdoor work for me. Some forester jobs are completely indoors, some are completely outdoors. I have about a 50-50 ratio, which I enjoy very much. I tend to pick the nice weather days to be outside and the rainy, snowy, cold days to be inside. But you know, all jokes aside, we do contend with like mosquito and black fly season and extreme cold and heat. So it's not always a walk in the park, but I can say that bug day in the woods is still better than a day in the office in most cases. So That's definitely a selling feature for me. I get to live in a rural community, which I really enjoy. I grew up in an even more rural community. I do appreciate the cost of living here and the amount of services and activities that are available to me, and just that sense of community in a small place. A good work-life balance, of course, that's always partially your own responsibility to ensure that you maintain that, but I do feel that there is a good work-life balance in my job. Amazing network of people in the forestry world. I feel like I can't say this enough. One of the most amazing things that I've learned is that people who work in the forest love the forest so much, probably more than anyone else that I've ever met. It always warms my heart to hear the stories of the people who have worked in the woods their entire life, and they might be multi-generational family members. So I like to take the opportunity to tweet about them whenever I can, because I think they have a really great story to tell, and they don't often tell it themselves. Now, which brings me to my next one. I love to spread the good word about forestry. I go to schools to talk about forestry, bring kids in the woods to active operation tours and mill tours, or just out to learn forestry skills. And that's one of the most rewarding parts of my job. And above all else, I've been employed since the day I graduated, which I think is pretty great. I've had the opportunity to do many different jobs, all of which I've enjoyed very much. So if any of you are on the verge of choosing a career or starting a career, I thought that I would just throw in a few tips that I have learned along the way that might help you in your green job path and decision. I would say always accept challenges. This is a map that I like to call my yes map. So of any time an opportunity has arisen for me that I may not feel that I'm qualified for, or that it's something that I would normally choose to do, or even apply to do, after careful consideration and trying to talk myself out of why I should not do it, saying yes has given me some really great experiences in life and taken me to some really cool places. I have a side job for the last couple of years called Mighty Jobs that totally just arose from saying yes to opportunities. So that has been a really cool learning experience for me. But I have learned that you may have to move to get started in this industry. I think it's pretty you want to live before you have a job in that place, and that can be limiting for some people. You might have to do something unglamorous, so you may end up doing grunt work. I had at least 3 or 4 years of pretty intense field work before I could become more choosy in my job selection, but I enjoyed that, and I think it was really valuable. I can say you will have to work incredibly hard, but I think that's a positive attribute in a job. You will always be challenged, and if you do more than is expected of you, people will notice that. And once you're identified as being a keener, you will have lots of champions on your side, which has definitely helped me along the way. And I would say you never know what's coming your way, so always stay open to those opportunities that if you put yourself out into the world, that will come back to you as well. So yeah, that's my experience of being a forester in Ontario, and I'll look forward to any questions after the next presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lacey. Appreciate it. So our next speaker is Lennard Joe. Lenny is president of the Nicola Tribal Association, the advisory body for 7 First Nations Indian bands in British Columbia. He's a registered professional forester, a member of, and you got to help me out here, Lenny, Nalakapam First Nation, and represents the Shucken band as a director. Over to you, Len.
Okay, good evening, or good day, sorry. I'm Lennard Joe. I'm from the Shakinen Reserve, and I'm also we were the Nicola Tribal Association. We just switched back to our cultural and appropriate name of the Scw'exmx Tribal Council, and Scw'exmx is just means the people of the creeks. So I'm from the southern interior of British Columbia. I'm a member of the SFI organization since, I don't know if it's 2010 or 2011, but one of the things that I want to share today is that even this becoming a forester, not realizing that one day you become a board of director of such a great organization such as SFI, and really having the vision or having the opportunity to have your vision played out in such a big role. So I'm going to upload and share my screen. I think this is how we do it. And you'll have to let me know if my screens come up. and I'll do it from the beginning.
Yes, it's come up. It just needs to be full screen now.
Okay, how are we doing?
Perfect.
Okay, thank you guys. So again, so my name is Lennard Joe, and I am also the chair of the Scw'exmx Tribal Council and a forester. I'm actually in British Columbia. I'm by numbers the 6th registered professional forester that happens to be First Nations. So one of the things about being my job or doing my job was that at the start I used to call myself First Nations forester, and it wasn't until about 6 or 7 years ago I looked at it and said, you know what? We're all foresters. We all just come from different backgrounds, and we bring that to our profession. So now I call myself a forester that happens to be First Nations. So one of the things though that and I'm really glad that I got to follow Lacey, because you know, it doesn't matter how old you are, you require inspiration. You require that light to be shed on what you do so we can do what we do. And so for me, I am in Scw'exmx, and so my father is actually the 8th chief of our tribe since 1860. And so what I say that is because we carry a lot of the corporate memory of who we are. And so you always carry your past into your present. And I believe that with that, you have this responsibility to mold wherever you are and bring that into the future. So why I say that was that when I started, I worked for some great companies, but they weren't doing what I wanted to do and what I saw as the gaps. So I started a company called Grizzly Man Resource Management, and my traditional name is Scw'exmx, which is Grizzly Man. So it was a lot easier to say Grizzly Man than Scw'exmx. And so I started this company, and I did it because what I wanted to do wasn't quite invented yet. And so today, you know, since 1999 to today has been quite a journey of where we're going. And so today, now I'm the general manager of a company that's owned by the 8 First Nations called Scw'exmx Resources. Scw'exmx is just means the first people or the old people that were here. So I saw some really flashy screens. I'm sorry, but I thought, okay, I'm still going to put up a screen. And one of the things is I thought, what do I get to do? What makes my job kind of cool and these things? So one of the things is that since we're owned by the 8 bands and we are the caretakers of our lands here, but we're also involved in, what do they call it, the balancing of the economics, the environment, and the social cultural things of everything that's within our communities. We're now working on what we want and what we want to see in the land. We're putting that and bringing that into our practices. And so one of the things is that we take responsibility of managing all our lands here. We're in a very unique situation here in my community. We actually have a lot of registered professional foresters that happen to be First Nations. We probably lead that in probably the majority of the country. And we have a lot of registered forest technicians. And one is because we started our own college here at Nicola Valley Institute of Technology, and we have a technical forestry program. So with that, we have this arsenal of young minds that just keep coming out and keep pushing the envelope of saying, you know, what if, and how do we do this? And so we're actually working on these things of looking after our lands. So some of the things that I get to do, and I'm just going to go over it, I have some slides that follow this, is that having the responsibility of looking after our territory is fiber utilization, access management. We're working on zero net roads, prescribed cultural burning, cultural survival area management strategies. We have a guardian program, and most of all, we're working on governance, the reconciliation through changes of policies, acts, and regulations. And we're doing this across the whole spectrum. What I want to see is that, and why I love my job is just like Lacey said, when I started out, a lot of hard work. You know, I love those days in the bush because there's no place to really think and get your thoughts and work on your future than when you're out in the bush and working. So one of the things here is fiber utilization. So when we started our company, the grassroots and the elders, they said, you know what, there's a lot of stuff we leave out in the bush. How can we actually better utilize it? And how can we actually just reduce burning? So one of the things is with my company, we were actually able to, whenever we had the availability to pursue, we were always in fiber utilization, whether it was bringing out chippers and onto the blocks. Then we started the grinding program for bioenergy here in British Columbia, shipping it all the way down to the coast where they mix it in with their wet hog fields and everything. So that we're running electrical bioenergy programs down there. But the other one was trying to get the trucks out. So this picture here is actually a bundler, and it's like a baler. And what it does is it grabs all the woody debris and we throw it through like a wrapper, and it makes a shape of a log. So the one thing in British Columbia, we've got a lot of mountains. It's really hard to move product. So this actually makes logs that we can put in a conventional logging truck and bring it out into our green energy plant that we have here in Merritt. We also do a top log program. So our sorts are really condensed to how much fiber we utilize. And again, that just creates more and more jobs. In the end, we look and say, if we can make 25 cents, or even if it costs us 25 cents, and it creates, jobs, that's what we're doing. And if it utilizes fiber. So fiber utilization is one of the things. This carbon sequestration, nowadays, that's the word. What are you doing? We just went through a big mountain pine beetle thing here in BC. So what we're trying to do is we're working on programs right now where we're reducing roads and going out and working with GPS. We're actually using drones, and we're actually partnering up with a drone company that's working on all the roads in our territory. And we're really breaking down, going out, reducing, doing road rehabilitation and planting. So again, we're going to be working on that 2 billion tree program with Canada too. But this is really working out because it manages riparian, wildlife habitat interaction, and also again the roads, reducing them allows for surface flow. The other thing that we're doing is we're bringing back fire in British Columbia. It's really cool. I think we're probably working on it throughout, but this is actually a cultural burn, and we call it prescribed cultural burning. So we're bringing back fire to work on areas that are that were normally not burned, and reducing fuel loading, but also taking a look at what comes back. We've always been practicing burns, but not at the level of bringing it into forestry. We've been in the lower grassland areas and other things like that, seen a lot of burns and a lot of fires. But what we're doing now is we're actually going back on the land, and we're actually going to be bringing back prescribed burning onto our forestry programs. Again, this creates some new opportunities for people to bring back fire prescriptions, to do some research on the befores and the afters. We can work on, we know the what's, but really trying to figure out the answers on the why and the how we do it with the current environments. Again, we've been doing this for a time immemorial, but to the extent now that there's other things to worry about, infrastructure, communities, and everything else. So climate change, lots of different things. So prescribed cultural burning is something that's really growing in my neck of the woods. Cultural survival area management strategies. So this is, again, forestry is not just forestry anymore. And so in Canada, in British Columbia, we're really working hard on bringing back bringing and immersing our cultural values into fiber management. So this is actually a program, Cultural Survival Area Management Strategy. The CSA program here is something that's bought into by the province, is bought into by all the large mainstream forest licenses on working on developing CSA management strategies. So we're working on developing spatial, temporal, and protocols on everything that we hold. deer. So, you know, you're taking a look at that one picture, and, you know, this is the one picture that I have some permission to share. And yes, it's bigger than a man's foot. So we're actually developing management strategies around little people, Sasquatch, our strong medicine areas, but we also are developing around our food and our gathering areas. And since I'm in a First Nations company, we're actually doing these pilots on the ground, developing it, and we're actually seeing the difference. So one of the things why I'm mentioning this is that there's a lot of different things that are going on and available at the First Nations level. And when you go into a lot of our First Nations offices or Indigenous offices, they're not just First Nations there. Everybody's coming together. And this is the sharing the knowledge and bringing what we want. And I think what I see as a picture is this is going to come and create something that becomes our picture of what people see as British Columbia forestry, Canada forestry, North American forestry, is this immersion of these values that really create our identity of who we are. The last, maybe my last one, I'm not sure. I just made these slides, was we have the Chief Intlakatmik Assembly, and the Chief is just the house, and the Intlakatmik House. So what we've created was the Guardians program. And so this program here is a group of people and grassroots people. We're also bringing in non-Indigenous people into this program too, who have a lot of background within our territory, but to look after the land, look after the house. And so we're creating these new jobs out there where it's actually, you know, it's not compliance and enforcement. It's actually, you know, the guardian. And I think just changing the name and putting that and saying, you know what, you're looking after this. What do guardians do? They have a responsibility. What do guardians do is that they're actually, they look after things. So this program that's coming out is, and you're starting to see more and more of it within Canada, is First Nations, Indigenous people, putting our people on the land to actually monitor, look after things, and participate in things, bring back the information, but also share our information out there. So in closing, I always say I'm someone's seventh generation. We always say we're looking after for the seventh generation, and so I'm here and I have the corporate memory of my people and the land that I'm looking after, and it was made possible by someone 7 generations ago. And so when I look and I go forward, that's what I feel that we have. And so as being someone's 7th generation and working on the next 7 generations, my goal is to not just keep it, as we say, in-house and keep it under lock and key, but actually bring some of this stuff out so we can share it and we can actually create something, because we're actually creating our new normal every day. And the only way we can do it is by having trust and relationships so that we can bring this out and have that environment so that it can work. So my presentation was basically starts with Lacey. Most of you who are coming out and starting these new careers, a lot of what you're going to do in the future may not even be there yet. It just may be an idea in your head. And that's what I encourage you to do, is actually bring this idea and work on it and work on the steps to be able to make it come to life. And so for me, that is what I wanted to share today. Scw'exmx.
Thank you very much, Lenny. Really appreciate your words. And we're so fortunate to have you as well on SFI's board and Project Learning Tree Canada's board, and to have your perspective. I wanted to thank both Lacey and Lenny for their comments as forest managers. And this is Kathy Abusow speaking. Kevin Edgson unfortunately had to leave the call for an emergency, so I'll be moderating the session. And Jess Kaknovicius, our VP of Community Engagement, will also be helping me here and there. So one of the questions that was, could be for either of you, it came in, I believe, when Lacey was speaking though, but what value have you got from your professional designation? If you didn't need an RPF designation for your job, would you have still pursued it? So Lacey or Lenny?
can speak to that. I'm actually a counselor for the Professional Association in Ontario. It has been required for every job I've ever had. And if it wasn't, I would still pursue it because it opens so many more job opportunities for you. And it is legally required through the Professional Foresters Act in Ontario to be a member of the association if you're going to be manipulating forest cover in Ontario. So it's definitely a necessity here. I'm not sure about other provinces' acts and regulations, and I also have found that it has been rewarding to get involved with the association, because before I didn't quite understand the purpose and the whys, and now I have a much better understanding and appreciation for it.
Thank you for that. And then another participant asked, are there any opportunities in the forestry sector for an environment and sustainability graduate without becoming a registered professional forester? Not sure if Lenny or Lacey wanted to take that. If not, I certainly can.
I think that yes, there is. Again, there's so much emergence of this. Actually, within our area here, a lot of RP bios are being brought into the forestry fold, and there's a lot more stewardship going on, and there's a lot more of I guess the interaction between all the organizations. It is actually becoming a true a stewardship program. So I see a lot of the sciences coming into forestry.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. And then a very specific question came, what bioenergy facilities are you part of on the coast? Do you supply the brush piles to the Surrey Biofuel Facility? I'm not sure that anyone has a specific answer to that very specific question, but thought I'd
we actually do. We bring some to the Surrey, but we work through some larger companies. So we actually have larger buyers. And so our stuff goes all the ways to Campbell River, actually. So a lot of our dry material will go right to Surrey to Campbell River, but we've also got a green energy plant here in Merritt that we supply energy to.
Excellent, excellent. And another another participant was asking about the land being managed by foresters. Is it solely Crown land, or in Lenny's case, his nation's land? Or does it ever involve privately owned land? And most certainly it involves forest management is for all lands. So private land, public land, First Nations land, community land, university lands, all of the land that has forests on it, urban lands, require a manager. So it certainly applies to all. Not sure if Lacey or Lenny had anything else they wanted to add to that before we go to some of the other speakers.
I could just say the land that I work on is actually private land. So it's owned by the upper tier municipality and is classed as private land. So a lot of counties in that case have taken it upon themselves to have forest management plans and forest managers. And also there's a lot of consultants around, consulting foresters that work on private land.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Lacey and Lenny. Really appreciated, your presentations. And while I will say that I agree that there's a job for anyone that is interested in green jobs and the forest sector, always getting whatever credentials and designations you can is always helpful. I mean, those are ways to build your skill set, ways to increase your pay. So regardless, if there is a pathway for you to get a designation or a certification, I highly recommend it. We're now going to move on to, I think all of the panels have a conservation element regardless, but to two conservation speakers next up. The next one is Dr. Gordon Stenhouse. He's a research scientist and program lead with the Grizzly Bear program with FRI Research. For those that don't know, Sustainable Forestry Initiative has a forest management standard. We have conservation programs, community programs, and environmental education programs through Project Learning Tree Canada. Gordon Stenhouse's work, in part that he'll be speaking to you about, was funded by one of the SFI conservation grants. And so we're really looking forward to hearing about his work in this job, because again, if you manage forest lands, the type of research that Gordon has done helps us all know how to better manage the landscape for multiple values. So over to you, Gordon.
Hello, everyone. It's Gordon Stenhouse here. I'm just going to share my screen here with you. And let's see if I can get this working. Can people still hear me?
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay, I'm just trying to, there we go. How about that now? And how about that? Okay, let me see. There, I'll start there. Okay, all good now?
Yep, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Good day, everyone. It's Gordon Stenhouse here. I'm in sunny Alberta, next to the Rocky Mountains, talking to you today. And what I'd like to do is let you know that we're going to have another big blue here today. When you live near the mountains, you always have to never put away the snow shovels till about July. So that's going to tie into a couple of slides later on here. But what I wanted to talk to everyone today about was that we have a program that's been monitoring grizzly bears, which is a threatened species in Alberta, for the past 23 years. And when I first started as a wildlife biologist in Alberta, after I moved from the Northwest Territories after polar bear work, I was viewed as a bit of an anomaly in the world of foresters. I was a biologist coming in, and that's changed significantly over the years. And now biologists are part of the forest community. And what I can tell you is that forest landscapes contain lots of resources, and they're resources for not only forestry and the fibers and wood that we need as a society, but they also are utilized by the energy sector. So oil and gas development, mining activities, lots of things occur on forested landscapes. And in the midst of all that, we have a whole host of wildlife species who also depend on the same forest, and that dependence makes it challenging. We have basically a situation where we're trying to coexist on a shared landscape. And that coexistence means we have to manage forest landscapes to recognize the needs of both people and, in this case, wildlife. And I study specifically grizzly bears, that's my job. And grizzly bears in Alberta are viewed as a threatened species in our province. And they are also considered to be an indicator of healthy ecosystems. So when you have a top carnivore in the ecosystem, it's considered to be healthy. And we can't monitor every bit of biodiversity on the landscape. It's very difficult. So we tend to pick certain species that we look at. And one of them, of course, is a threatened or endangered species. And in Alberta, grizzly bears are threatened. One of the things that everybody should recognize is that it's one thing to say we need to coexist and we need to make sure we keep all the parts of the ecosystem. But what's really important now is that we need to have skilled scientists and technical staff who can identify and document and report to our society that we're doing this. It's not just enough to say it, we have to show that we're doing it. So we need people that know how to do that. And these are not easy tasks. So I've been fortunate with my program for the past number of years to get support through SFI and Project Learning Tree to have staff work with me to develop some skill sets. We have been monitoring grizzly populations in Alberta in a specific area around where I live, which is just outside Jasper National Park. Some of the objectives of our program are to identify and document habitat use for bears, as well as their survival and movements in the area. So recognize this area is undergoing a host of forest management activities, which also now is dealing with mountain pine beetle outbreak. So we're trying to monitor bears while all this is going on in the landscape. We use primarily non-invasive techniques to gather biological samples to collect the data we need to undertake this. So as part of that, we employ and train students and others to understand how to collect data and also to increase their awareness of both biodiversity and conservation. Finally, and this is one of my big goals, I want to inspire the next generation of scientists. I've had a long career studying bears, and I'd like to pass on some of the knowledge and get the next generation to take this on. So what I wanted to talk to people about is, this falls in with my snow comment at the beginning of my opening slide here. But so when you work on bears, you go and we have to put out barbed wire to collect hair, and we use that to gather DNA. But sometimes, of course, you go to the spring and Mother Nature has decided that it's going to make your job a bit harder. So normally when we're setting out barbed wire, it's, the snow's all gone. But in this case, these slides from last year, we had the late winter snow and we were having to work even with that. And also this picture, when you try to work on bears, it's not always glamorous, let me tell you. And you might never see a bear, by the way. But we all have to put out stinky stuff to attract bears. Bears live by their nose and they find food, and we put out stinky stuff and the bears come in to investigate, and then we get their hair for our monitoring work. One of the big things that our world has changed, it's not like the CSI programs you watch on TV, but a lot of the things are similar. We collect DNA data sets, and we collect it through a number of things. One is through using barbed wire that you saw there, and we collect hair, and from that hair, we can identify the species of bear, so black bear or grizzly bear, and male and female. We also go and we gather scat, and that's bear poop, if you will, fancy name for it, but we gather that scat and we look at, of course, diet, but we also gather the DNA from that. As part of the DNA, we put them in little vials, and of course, we've developed an app for that. Finally, we also put up trail cameras, those cameras out in the bush to identify bears coming in, and this is sort of a training session with our field crews that we're gathering information from trail cameras. Here are some images of what you'd see when you have bears coming in to investigate that stinky stuff that we put in that pile of debris in the middle of the area there, and you can see there's barbed wire around there, and we then can gather images from those cameras. At the same time, that's what a bit of hair looks like, and of course you don't grab the hair with your fingers because you can get, of course, your own DNA on the hair of that, so we use tweezers and gloves to gather that hair for our DNA analysis. Finally, I want to express my desire that see today, here's some pictures from about world of bears. You may never, if you bears, everyone thinks you're going to see a bear every day. That's rarely the case, but you will likely see some bears if you spend time out in the bush. And we need people to be able to, in fact, look at this in the long term. And it's not just bears. There's woodland caribou. There's many other species that depend on forested landscapes. And we need people to be able to understand the needs of these animals and how forestry can craft their operations to recognize a situation where we can all coexist on that shared landscape. And I hope that opens up my world of bears to you a little bit, and I'd be happy to take questions after Gail's talk.
That's correct. Thank you so much, Gord. That was great, very inspiring. A few questions have certainly come in. So thanks for that. So next up is Gail Wallin. She's Executive Director of the Invasive Species Council of BC. She's also an SFI and a Project Learning Tree Canada board member. And she's just got a lot of experience with invasive species programming, and has also had PLT Canada Green Jobs Youth in this arena. So really looking forward to Gail's presentation. Your job could stop aliens. So over to you, Gail.
Hey, thank you, Kathy. Is my screen up running for everybody?
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, so I title is aliens. The more common term that we use in our world is invasive species. I'm going to provide just a little bit of background because I'm actually willing to bet that this initiative actually can link to every single one of you on the phone in your daily lives now. Whoops. Now I'm just trying to get it advance. Okay. First of all, I just want to explain that I actually don't work with government. Our team is actually a non-government organization. We're the Invasive Species Council of British Columbia. We're one of about 10 chapters across Canada, and we're affiliated with a group called the Canadian Council on Invasive Species. 15 years ago, you didn't see this because people weren't paying as much attention. It's a major growth area for both employment and in some ways for bad reasons, because there's more and more invasive species we have to be worried about, but also for really good reasons because we're paying way more attention to them now than what we did in the past. So I'm just give you a quick overview, a little bit about what are invasive species and why it touches every one of our lives. First of all, I'll start off by saying invasive species are alien. They don't belong to the new places that they've come. And not all foreign species, not all non-native species are invasive, but only a very few of them are. And it's those ones that cause major economic, environmental, or social impacts. So you can have crocuses and daffodils in your garden, that's great, they stay there. There's lots of species who don't stay there that move to other areas and they cause major impacts. In Canada, they estimate $34 billion per year cost of invasive species to our country. What's different about invasive species is when they come to us from a foreign area, they come without their natural predators. So there's usually nothing that will keep them in check in a normal population level like it would have been in its home country. Gordon's presentation and the earlier people were talking about conservation, and that's woven into all the work. It's woven into all forestry work today, into all species at risk. It's a key factor, and that's because invasive species are the second biggest threat to our biodiversity, not just in Canada, but internationally. And so wherever you are, there will be some invasive species. Hopefully there's less as you go outside of the urban areas. Because what we do know is most invasive species, and this is bizarre to believe, are actually intentionally introduced. If they're not intentionally introduced, they're accidentally introduced by people. So the solution in this work is people. So I'm going to provide a bit of an overview about invasive species, but I'm going to guess that every one of you can link to them. I'm going to ask you to sit back and think about, did you ever have a goldfish as a child, or did your friend? Have you ever seen English ivy planted on some buildings? Those are just a couple examples that usually touch most people. I'm going to start off with some different phases of work that you can have in an invasive species world. But what I found interesting about this is that I can create a linkage with everyone, whether they're a gardener, a forester, a biologist, a pet and aquarium trade. I can find a linkage to them and an invasive species, and then we can take action together. So one of the things about invasive species, the most important thing, and we're all living in a stage of pandemic right now, and the most important thing for that is to prevent it from getting into your house. Hence many of us are working from home. The most important thing for invasive species is to keep them out of our country, our province, or our area. And so that's a prevention technique. What we do to make sure they're not in our province or area or region that we're living in is inventory and monitoring. So that can vary across a whole range of employment opportunities. You see here some examples of people doing surveys and monitoring, whether they're being on the water or the land. It's doing assessments. Do we have a forest pest here? Do we have zebra quagga mussels? Do we have a yellow flag iris? Do we have species that aren't normally in your area? So understanding how to identify them and how to report them, that's actually being incorporated into many professional and technical training right now. For example, foresters, biologists, agrologists all receive training related to inventory and monitoring. And by recognizing when something's here or when it's not here, we can take actions to make sure it doesn't spread. So all the field-based skills are really applicable, and this ties obviously into things like GIS, because once you've got the information, it has to be uploaded and to a data site and analyzed. So that's a phase one. That's an early phase. Once you've got the information on what we have and where it is or where it's not is equally as important. The question is, what do you do to control and contain it? And that varies across the field. If you're in the agriculture sector, you're going to be taking a look at controlling and removing invasive plants of some sort. If you're dealing in the aquatic world, you're going to be taking a look at how can you make sure that the equipment that will actually move species, whether it's snails, slugs, or milfoil from one lake to another, or from one water body to another. Invasive mussels are a big thing through Ontario. And now they're moving west. So there's a major effort in Western Canada to make sure that our equipment is clean and it doesn't come from contaminant lakes. But even in British Columbia, lakes in the southern part of British Columbia will have Eurasian milfoil, which is not native and very aggressive. It closes off lakes for swimming and recreation. So they're making sure that the boats that are and swimming gear that are used in those lakes is not transporting it to new lakes. Probably one of my favorite stories, and I have some really favorite stories that I just love some invasive species, but is the northern snakehead fish and goldfish. Those two species are really, they're sort of something that captures everybody's eye. When you can have a northern snakehead fish, which they found in a place in Vancouver, that can actually crawl across land, eat little ducklings, it catches people's attention. And that was there because somebody introduced it from a live fish market. The goldfish, how many of us had goldfish as a kid, released it into the pond or lake or stream because we didn't want to hurt the little buddy? That's a really big issue across Canada that we're just starting to catch up on, because those fish actually become really big and they displace all the native population. There's a couple of forestry pests, like whether it's the whether it's the gypsy moths or the tussock moth. Right now, in British Columbia, we're still free of the gypsy moth. It is in Eastern Canada, but early detection is absolutely vital. And there's an immediate response plan in British Columbia to make sure it's totally eradicated from the province and doesn't become established. But then there's other species like the Doug-fir tussock moth, which is just starting to spread in BC, and usually it's spread through firewood. So again, taking action on those early and containing and removing them before they become established is really important. And you can just see by that survey that there's many different kinds of jobs that can be involved here from the field-based side. Here's the other side that often people don't think about as totally linked to green jobs, but we absolutely need really effective outreach and communication. In the field of invasive species, as I mentioned already, most invasive species are moved by people. Therefore, the solution to stopping the introduction and spread of invasive species is by people. So working in the outreach and communication side is really vital, involving youth at all ages, and adopting and taking care of a local habitat. Many places across Canada have had programs like Adopt a Highway or adopt a local block in your community to remove garbage. The movement we're seeing now across Canada is to adopt a local area to remove those invasive species that are in that area. And that not only helps the environment and the natural biodiversity, but probably also protects your pets and family that are wanting to use that area. So outreach and communication is really important. And in today's world, that's no longer just in person, it's really heavy on the social media side. Research, this is one that often flies under the radar and yet is absolutely vital that we need across all areas of forest management. Whether it's taking a look at what are the, first of all, how can we better identify in our life invasive species before they're well established? Doing environmental eDNA is a very common tool to figure out what's in that water body or what's in that ecosystem before you can actually see it. So there's those tools that are underway. Taking a look at, in some places, the use of herbicides is the only way to control really aggressive invasive plants. But if you can't use herbicides, or if it doesn't work, another one that we work on internationally, and a lot of our work is based in Switzerland, is taking a look at biocontrol, is what's a safe species that can be introduced that won't attack any of the native species, that's been under research for 5-10 years. It's a biocontrol agent that will come in and actually control the population of really aggressive invasive plants or other species. They're taking a look at, we're always looking at more research on the forest pest side because we know in the forest, if forests are going to be defoliated or attacked like we have in the east with the emerald ash borer or gypsy moth, those are ones that will actually change our ecosystems. And it's because they're introduced and not again with their natural predators that we want to catch them early before they become established. So it's really important to invest in research because it'll give us better tools for identifying, maintaining, controlling, and responding to invasive species. So that's sort of just a quick overview of some of the jobs that I want to touch bases on. I just wanted to wrap by saying, like, on the Invasive Species Council British Columbia staff team, we have professional agrologists, we have foresters, we've had biologists, we've got professional communicators, we've got professional educators, and they're all working for one purpose, and that's to have healthy habitats that protect our biodiversities, and that's because invasive species are such a big threat. So it's actually for me, it's a neat job because I can make a linkage with any audience. You give me an audience and I can find a way to link with you because we all have a role in this. And so therefore, as a professional, and you take a look at your career, and I know all of our staff can guarantee they've never been bored and they always have a new opportunity around the corner. So I'll leave it there. Thank you
so much, Gail. Hey, everyone, it's 2 o'clock. We have another half hour left. We've done 4 presenters in an hour. We have 2 more to do in the next half hour. So I'm going to ask both Gordon and Gail, when I ask your questions, if you can try to be succinct. If we have more time to go back in the end for more detail, we're going to do that. But I just want to make sure that we get all presenters in, and then we will hang on for additional questions, folks, in case. But for now, I do want to quickly put some questions to Gordon and then to Gail. So Gordon, do you have to have a science or an environmental education background to get into these conservation jobs, i.e. the Grizzly program was one of them? And then another one to you, Gordon, was in speaking about training students for this type of work with grizzlies, how much experience and what sort of qualifications are the students expected to bring to the position prior to training? What are the base requirements? So Gordon, over to you for those.
Certainly, the basic requirements that I look for are people that are interested in the area and are considering a future education or training in the field of sciences. And many of the people that I have hired over the last few years are now getting an undergrad degree, and I've got one student who just finished a master's based on starting with a project learning tree, so it's very rewarding.
Excellent, thank you, thank you. And we might be able to do some follow-up tweets and things as well to help folks on some of these skills and also to answer some of the questions that came up. So do follow PLT Canada's Twitter. We'll try to get some of them out there. So Gail, I'm going to read off the questions to you, and then you can decide which ones you want to take now and which ones you might want to hold, or you might be able to rip through them all quickly. What specific skills are you referring to when you mention GIS? What are the protocols or procedures being used to ensure the public is not intentionally or unintentionally transforming invasive species? Is there active monitoring or public signs? How do you remove invasive species? And would it be considered an asset to hold a pesticide license? Over to you, Gail, for any or all of them. And like I said, if we have time at the end, we can pick up some more.
Oops. GIS, quickly, any mapping and tracking, because there needs to be more and more data collected across Canada. That's done both in the private and public sector. Public protocols, they vary from province to province, from local community to local community. If you take a look on our website, you'll definitely see a range of signage and information that are out there, and they're always looking for new partners. Absolutely an asset to have a pesticide applicator ticket, because that is one of the ways to make sure that you're certified to provide and ensure safe distribution of those products. And how to remove invasive species is very challenging because it varies from one species to the next, which is why you need to have a wide range of professionals involved in order to address that. So dealing with American bullfrog is totally different than dealing with milfoil or dealing with the Asian giant hornet. So everyone requires a special technique, but I can deal with people online on one-to-one.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Okay, that was fantastic. A few more questions have come in, but we're going to wait till the end. So next up is innovation and products in the forest sector. The next speaker is Ann Colvin, director of the Mass Timber Institute in Toronto, and she's going to speak to you about the future of building is wood. I made some passing comments in my presentation, but over to you, Ann. That's great. Ann, I can see your slide, but I cannot hear you, so you may be on mute. Bottom left corner to unmute. There's a little microphone there. I still can't hear you.
Can you hear me now, Kathy?
Yes, I can. Thank you. Perfect.
I see that my slides have actually gone upside down.
No, they're perfect here, so it's all good.
So I've in front of me on my screen, I have my last slide. Do you have one with a woman doing kind of a yoga pose in the front?
Oh, sorry. When you said upside down, I thought you meant like turned upside down. Zach, can you
yeah,
put...
and you'll just have to reset your slides to the beginning. Yeah.
There we go.
Perfect.
Okay, we're here. Thank you very much, Kathy, and thank you to everyone who's listening. I'm very excited to be here as both an educator and a forester. I've been listening carefully to the people who preceded my presentation, and I'm finding everything you say intensely interesting, and I'm sure the students and other parties in the audience are also doing so. As I mentioned, I am also a teacher. I teach at the University of Toronto in the Master of Forest Conservation program. I'm always excited about promoting that program and following up on Gordon's discussion about the kinds of students he likes to work with. We recruit students from all over the world, actually, and they come often with a science background, but we've also had mathematicians, philosophers, and journalists in our program. They have to work at it a little bit differently, but we found that most people who come, and you have to have an honors BA and have had some success academically, are very well equipped to throw themselves into forest conservation. And often a person doesn't know that's what they want to do until after they finish their first degree. I'm also a forester, and as is the case with Lacey and Lennard, very excited and very much a promoter of professional forestry. And I sat for 8 years on the Ontario Professional Foresters Council. So I am now involved in something called mass timber. And okay. And we consider mass timber to really be a very exciting future for forestry. And I say that, and I think about Peter Drucker's comment, and many of you on the call are probably too young to remember Peter Drucker, but he was a very big business guru, and he used to say, the best way to predict the future is to create it. And certainly in the mass timber space, that is something that we are trying to do very much. For those who don't know what we mean by those words, mass timber, we're really talking about a technological advancement that uses engineered wood for load-bearing structures and is considered a greener addition to conventional reinforced steel and concrete, which is what we use in construction now. Mass timber construction involves assemblies of wood, floor, and ceiling panels that you can manufacture off-site and can be erected very quickly when they're brought to the construction site. Therefore, there's a lot of cost savings compared to conventional construction. And this is ideal for low to medium rise building structures. What we're seeing really is architects and designers being captivated by the idea of using mass timber to build very tall buildings. And we have some buildings more than 80 stories being planned in Tokyo, Chicago, and London. This is a visual of a building that we're planning to build at the University of Toronto. It's going to be built near St. George and Bloor. It's a beautiful 14-story building that's going to contain offices and labs and classrooms. Its main tenant is going to be the Rotman School of Management. And you will know, the folks in the West Coast, that in 2017, the University of British Columbia, the first one, to build a mass timber student residence called the Brock Commons. And Laurentian University in Sudbury has also built a mass timber home for its School of Architecture. We partner with George Brown College in Toronto, and they also have a mass timber building being designed to be built on the lake shore. Governments provided a little bit of money to get these buildings going, and they're called demonstration buildings so that others will replicate them. But I was told by University of Toronto's head architect that it's the job of universities and colleges to do the way and to lead the way actually in doing difficult things that others will not or cannot do. There are two big challenges that really, we think, open the door for more use of mass timber in the future. And that is a growing population. We are expecting populations to grow enormously over the next 30 years. Almost 70% of people will be living in cities at that point. And certainly we have to have a way of housing people in affordable, sustainable fashion. What are the benefits of mass timber? Well, they're really the benefits of building with wood generally, with a couple of additions. First of all, it reduces the carbon footprint. Everybody on this call knows that wood's a renewable resource that sequesters carbon. And unlike steel and concrete, it does not emit carbon. Building with wood, and particularly mass timber products, requires less energy put, therefore making it more energy efficient. And there's a construction efficiency that pertains to mass timber that is not necessarily the case for other kinds of wood buildings. And certainly being able to fabricate off-site is a huge advantage. And sometimes we think about mass timber as being a bit like a big Lego set, where you design the building, you build the pieces off-site, you bring them on-site. They're put up very quickly by cranes. There are big differences in the way that carpenters build residential housing today. And in fact, the Carpenters Union in Toronto is very on side with mass timber and has just graduated their first class of carpenters who have proficiency in erecting mass timber buildings. And finally, mass timber shares with all wood products a biophilic design, attraction. People feel healthier and happier when they're in wood buildings. And we also know from the research that landlords can obtain higher rents from tenants who are working and living in wood buildings. The green jobs of the future, that's what we're talking about in this session. And certainly there are all kinds of them, and they start with sustainable forestry. And of course, as all of us recognize, forests exist outside urban areas. And what excites us about mass timber is the benefits do not stay in downtown Toronto or Vancouver or Montreal. We're all very aware, those of us in forestry, that there are big regional disparities across Canada, a north versus south kind of struggle historically. And so we're very excited with mass timber at the prospect of small mills manufacturing mass timber products in small communities across Canada. We feel that's a very feasible business plan, and therefore there will be jobs, we feel, in mass timber construction beginning in the forest. And again, I can't emphasize enough, as all my colleagues have said this afternoon, we don't have anything unless we start with sustainable forests. So with that, I think I will stop my presentation and entertain any questions you might have. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anne, for that presentation. We're just going to hear from Dr. Wadud Hamad, and then we're going to put the questions to both of you. And so Dr. Wadud Hamad is a material physicist. He studied both philosophy and physics and earned his PhD from McGill University. He leads a team of researchers focusing on creating high value materials and structures in electronics, photonics, personal care, from cellulose nanocrystals that are both renewable and sustainable. So we've really put together a range of folks that, with a range of degrees, whose work is derived from our forests and a sustainable forest sector. So Dr. Hamad, over to you.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon to everyone. And if you happen to be on the West Coast, still good morning. I'm just trying to get the presentation up. I don't know if I should have it or.
Yeah, it's the
okay.
shared screen, just at the middle of your screen at the bottom.
Yeah, okay. I'll just give me 1 second if you don't mind. Okay, is everybody able to see the screen and hear me as well?
We can now see the screen, but if you could put it on full screen, that would be great. Right now, we're seeing your slides down the side as well.
Okay.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Excellent.
Excellent.
There's just a slight delay. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for the kind intro, and I'm very pleased to be with everyone this morning, afternoon, to share some thoughts and reflections of what you can else do with green jobs, development from forestry-based materials. To continue with the previous presenter, where we work, FP Innovations is one of the oldest independent, non-for-profit private research centers in the world. It's Canadian, of course, pan-Canadian from east to west coast, and it specializes in trying to look into developing bioproducts from the forest biomass particularly, but all kind of biomass as well, and also trying to create value out of managing the forest for both energy utilization and for developing these bioproducts. There are groups that look into utilizing timber in construction, like the former speaker was talking about. Where I'd like to focus this to the few minutes on is how to create some high value products everyone is using and you don't normally expect them to be coming from wood or forestry based materials. So traditionally, where we've known wood based products to come from and utilized is wood products, building houses primarily, and in some cases low-rise buildings, but primarily pulp. And also there has been some utilization of the cellulose-based chemicals and other chemicals that are derived from wood for applications in, for example, making special chemicals. Every single tablet that a person uses, whether it's a Tylenol or others, have what's called microcrystalline cellulose. And these are all cellulose-derived materials. The paints, coatings, and a slew of other materials, textiles also, many of these textiles have cellulose in them, either completely or in hybrid with other fibers. Where we're trying to go, and as you see in this slide, is to go beyond these high volume, well-entrenched products that most of us have been using for decades into something else. What we have been working on is actually decomposing wood. Nature over millennia has worked very hard into making the tree structure as it is so that it can withstand both giving nutrients to the tree itself and allowing it to grow and stay strong, solid, and firm. What we have done is we have actually tried to focus on how do we ultimately create value from residual wood, wood that has not been utilized. So after you take the tree, take the lumber, use it for buildings or what have you, all the leftover chips and residual wood that has not been utilized or underutilized, how can we create value from it? And what we've done is we've taken these leftover materials, decomposed them into the basic constituent materials. Cellulose, most of you have heard, and perhaps some of you may know, is referred to as the most abundant biopolymer on the planet. However, it doesn't exist on its own. You have to come to it. So we've developed ways, chemical and mechanical ways, to create different forms of materials that help us create the new generation of products. Things like cellulose nanocrystals or cellulose fibrils or nanofibrils. We can also take the lignin. The slides have their own mind and seem to be moving by themselves. So these components, as well as the sugars that come from producing the nanocrystals and the filaments and the lignin, we try to use them separately or together to make new products that can go into electronics. So there is a very strong tendency over the last decade and a half to develop something called organic electronics. These have all organic materials, carbon-based materials. They don't have ceramics or metals like normally you would understand electronics to be. If you go, well, not now, but hopefully when this COVID thing is behind us, when you go to Best Buy and other shops, you will see very relatively inexpensive TVs and other electronics now, and many of them have what's called OLEDs, organic light emitting diodes. These are all made of non-ceramic and non-metal components, all organic. So this is an area where we've been working with for a while, developing conductive materials, materials that can go into all kinds of electronics, from your cell phone to TVs, to things, electronics in a car, in an airplane, and so on and so forth. Also using these materials for things in cosmetics and personal care. And in other components in terms of making automobiles and other transportation materials lighter and stronger. All cellulose based, and some of them are lignin also based. Where we can go with these materials is only limited by one's imagination. And the kind of expertise you can use spans all fields of science and design. So here we have, in my team, have a group of 8 scientists working. We specialized in physics, chemistry, and some of them are engineers, chemical engineers. But we also work very closely with designers, because one of the critical concepts in making products that are going to be both valuable and useful to society is to be able to engage all those concerned along the supply chain, those who produce the material, those who are going to use it. At the same time, those who can understand how to manipulate the matter, the molecules, what have you, which we can do, with those who can design the products. How can they take our materials to be best suited for a laptop, for a cell phone? And what is that component that can be best utilized for certain special textiles or coatings that are unique for automotive applications, and so on and so forth. So we work very closely with designers as well. The specific expertise that we have in my group, as I mentioned, all fields of science and some engineering, but mostly science, physics, chemistry, as well as some biochemists. But we work very closely with other disciplines to develop the final materials. One of the other key aspects of these materials and the new technologies we're trying to come up with is they're very modular. What that means is you can build them step by step and component by component. So you don't need to create everything in one place. So you can have one remote area in BC producing component X, and you can have another area in Ontario, Northern Ontario, Quebec, or where have you, Alberta, and produce another component. And then they can be assembled somewhere else. The new forms of technology that many of you might have heard, 3D printing or additive manufacturing, is also availing us with ways to construct these materials much less expensively, with very little requirements for investing a lot of money in building the infrastructure. You can expand the capabilities of the communities very wide and large, but you don't need to have it focused or localized in one area. So you can literally create jobs as diverse and as remotely as you can. These jobs can be high-tech jobs, no longer simply simple jobs, but high-tech jobs that can span literally the entire map of Canada. So with that, I hope I've given you some flavor of where you can take really underutilized fibers to create high-tech components, high-value materials that can go into products that you and I use every day. And for the next century, we will even be expanding a lot of these materials as well as the applications. If there are any questions, we'll be more than happy to entertain them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, and Anne and Wadud for your presentations that were excellent. And I'm sure Wadud said this, but to point out the obvious, many of those products, when he said, are made from cellulose and lignin. Obviously, cellulose and lignin are found in trees. And we're even, as he mentioned, talking about electronics and textiles. Our clothing can be made from trees. And so there was a question earlier that when we were focused more on sort of the outdoor and rural jobs that came in, that asked if there are careers for people in the green economy in urban areas and large cities. So I'm hoping now that based on both Anne and Wadud's presentation alone, you can see there's a wide variety of career pathways in urban centers and in cities as well that can be pursued. I do want to turn to the chat box where there's a few questions here. So Anne, I'm going to start with a couple for you. There was a question that said, you talked about our well-being being improved in higher buildings made with wood as opposed to a building made of steel or concrete. Are you talking about exposed wood or not necessarily?
Not necessarily. I think what we have, not necessarily. Okay. I think when we're talking about living in wood buildings, when we talk about the biophilic aspect of wood, we're talking about, in many senses, being able to look outside. You know, they've done studies on patients in long-term care residences and hospitals who feel healthier, who feel better when they look outdoors and they can see forests, they can see trees. That helps them. Indoors, I think we're talking about a different kind of exposure, and unfortunately, a number of the mass timber buildings early on have had to have the mass timber, the wood covered. For example, in the Brock's Commons building, there were some fire code concerns. They didn't get those sorted out before the building was finished, and I think they had to dry wall over some of the mass timber. So in that case, I would say probably there weren't as many benefits as there might have been.
Okay, thank you. And another question for you, Anne. What are the most significant barriers for remote or rural communities to being able to build with mass timber, and how can we overcome those barriers? Is there a substantial difference in the cost, production, and demand for this type of building in urban versus rural settings?
I think that's a great question, Kathy, and it really goes to the supply chain management issue that I think a number of the speakers have brought up. And that is, right now in Canada, we have a few companies, Nordique, which is fabulous, and Structure Lab and Structure Lam, but there are only a few companies that are actually building mass timber products. We are importing most of our mass timber from, we are importing it from Austria primarily, and the United States is gearing up. This is of great concern to us because we have to, we're looking in Toronto, for example, at the Sidewalk Labs project. They're planning on building, if they get approval from Waterfront Toronto, they're planning on building 8 to 12 tall wood buildings for residential use and commercial on the ground floors. In any event, that could their demand could come up as quickly as 2 years from now, and they may have to, there may not be enough mass timber suppliers in Canada to satisfy that, and that would be a really big lost opportunity. So getting back to your question, yes, I think it's important that we start to organize now in rural Canada, where there's obviously an interest and proximity of small communities to the forests, and start making decisions and investments to supply that product.
Thank you. And Dr. Hamad, would you recommend any programs at UBC in your field of sustainability? That's a question that came in.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, UBC has a number of them. Chemistry department, for example, has a program in nanotechnology and also has a sustainable component. The forestry, School of Forestry does not have a specific program, but has courses and elements around sustainability. Most of the science programs in Canada have an element around sustainability. UBC is one, but other schools around the country also have them. They don't have necessarily a specific focused program on sustainability, but they do have courses, and some of the mainstream programs that are now emerging have components and courses around sustainability.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you for that. And I wanted to point out that Project Learning Tree Canada is going to be publishing soon a green career guide. And those guides, and we're going to be doing several of them. The first one has more of an emphasis in the woods, but we're going to move through manufacturing to finished products. But even the first one has sprinklings of some of the manufacturing and finished products jobs as well. But these green career guides are going to talk about colleges and universities and the programs that they have and different pathways that you can take to pursue a career in different spaces and places. And so I think, you know, definitely stay plugged into PLT Canada's website and to our Twitter feed as we make these tools available. And again, we'll be bulking these tools out over time to talk about different career pathways so that we even get more emphasis as well into the wide variety of careers you've heard about today. I also wanted to point out that, again, depending on how COVID works out, I think most of you knew that this event was going to be an in-person event all day today and tomorrow in Ottawa, bringing youth together and employers together from our Green Jobs event. But we're just so thankful that we've had the opportunity to do this by webinar in such short order and for such a short period of time, and actually reaching more people than we would have reached if we did this in person. So that's very positive, with at times over 100 folks on the line. One of the things I did want to call out that depending on COVID-19 and how things progress, we currently do have our annual conference planned for October, and it's going to be in Vancouver at the Westin Bayshore Hotel. And part of this conference will definitely be focusing on green jobs in the forest sector. And we always have a big component for students as well. And this year we will plan on really bulking out our networking and learning components for both for students and also for employers. And we also provide student sponsorships to attend those events. So you'll be seeing, again, once things settle down and we know whether it's in person or not, you'll be seeing calls for applications and students to participate where we fund students to participate. And your degree background does not have to be immediately aligned with this. We are looking for all students who are interested in a green career pathway, and will be enabling that access through it. If for some reason we cannot do in person, regardless, we are also going to be planning an e-webinar portion to that October conference as well. And you will probably see many other workshops between now and October about jobs, career pathways, Indigenous pathways. In fact, Paul Robitaille, who's our manager of Indigenous and Youth Relations, has just been working with a wide variety of Indigenous peoples with jobs in the forest and conservation sectors. And it's their career pathway, what inspired them, what they chose to study, both in terms of traditional knowledge, in terms of formal education, what some of the decision points were, and where they landed in their careers. And that will be coming out soon as well. So there's just a wide variety of tools that we want to be working on together with our partners to open up everyone's eyes to the wonderful opportunities for you to make a difference in having a sustainable Canada and a sustainable future and a sustainable world. So I wanted to thank all of you for participating, as well as our speakers, and to Zach and our Project Learning Tree Canada team for putting this great web series together with us, and Jess as well. Zach and Jess, am I forgetting anything at all before we wrap? Well, they might be muted.
Nope.
Okay.
You got it.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you, everyone. Really enjoy the rest of your time. Stay safe. Do try to do a walk outdoors. It does a world of good. All right. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.